When the world is in crisis
การแก้ไขปัญหาโควิดถือเป็นวาระแห่งชาติ
and people are looking for hope and answers, Thai PBS World is there with you with the best minds of the day. Join us on Thai PBS World tonight, every weekdays at 7 p.m. Thai PBS World, we bring Thailand to the world.
สวัสดีค่ะ and very welcome to our 7 o'clock news Thai PBS World tonight. You are now with me นัทธา โกมลวาดิน
And I'm Nad Bunag in for Kun Thep Chayong.
Yes.
And today we hope that there would be good news on COVID-19 in Thailand because for a couple of days we had zero.
Yeah.
But today, unfortunately, there are 6 new cases of COVID-19, but at least they're not locally transmitted cases. So according to the CCSA assistant spokesperson, Dr. Panprapha Yongtrakoon, she said that all the new cases today are students. 5 of them came back from Saudi Arabia and the 6th came back from India last Friday, and all of them are now in state quarantine. All the 6 cases did not show any symptoms upon their arrival, but the student from India began to have fever on Tuesday and was sent to a hospital in Chonburi province for treatment and monitoring. Right now, the number of infections in state quarantine has increased to 204. In the past 2 weeks, 11 returnees from Saudi Arabia were found to be infected with COVID-19, 9 cases from UAE, and 6 cases from India. The 6 new cases today have brought the total infections in Thailand to 3,141 cases. A total of 2,997 patients have recovered from the virus and 86 cases are still hospitalized. The death toll still remains at 58. So we were hoping for good news, but unfortunately not for today.
But at least it's not among local transmission.
Exactly.
It's in the state quarantine.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Kun Nat, you must have heard of the word travel bubbles for quite a while. But probably it's not coming into practice anytime soon. Travel bubble means bilateral agreement of pairing between Thailand and another countries to allow foreign visitors to visit each other's country. But as of now, it's still the idea that need to be put into practice. And today, the CCSA said that they has not yet made a decision on travel bubbles, especially the main concern coming from CCSA Director Prime Minister Prayut Chan-o-cha, in which he said the priority for Thailand is public health, and that means that for as of now Thailand is not deciding to pair with any country yet, and Thailand has to prioritize public health. The government will assess possible revenue from the travel bubbles proposal and possible impact on local people from undetected infected visitors. And next week, Public Health Minister Mr. Anuthin Chanvirakul would propose the travel bubble plan to Prime Minister next week, and pairing would apply with countries with no risk of further spreading of COVID-19. And as of now, we may have heard of a list of countries of travel bubbles pairing with Thailand, for example, like Singapore, New Zealand, South Korea, Japan, or even China. But clearly, they haven't made any final decision yet.
Exactly, because speaking of the travel bubble, it can increase the risk of the resurgence of the virus. So that is the main concern for the government as well.
Yes, but we are in the 4th phase of easing restriction, Kun Nat, and we can see how business activities and many normal activity has been resumed, and one of them is school activity. And we will have story about it. And the market, like Pak Klong Talat market or flowers market, you may have heard that it's very lively during the night time, but during curfew, it's very quiet. But the market has resumed as business as usual again on Monday, and คุณกิติพัฒน์ ชื่นสุขจิต has this story.
The lights are back on at Pak Klong Talat, the largest wholesale and retail fresh flower market in Bangkok, as it resumes operations after the lifting of the night curfew. This is one of the most popular markets in the city and is of great symbolic value to Bangkok residents. Though the market features in many guidebooks, it saw few foreign visitors before the COVID-19 lockdown. Daily, many local retail florists visit the market in the early morning hours to buy stock for their shops around the capital. The urban poor who make a living stringing and selling flower garlands come to buy sacks of jasmine and marigold blossom. Even though the curfew has been lifted, on the first night, Pak Klong Talat remained very quiet with its familiar crowds absent. Vendors at the market have been hit hard economically by the pandemic lockdown.
หลังก่อนเคอร์ฟิวรายได้มันก็พอได้นะคะวันๆและหลังเคอร์ฟิวนี่แย่มากตกลงมากจาก 100% ได้เต็มที่แค่ 10%
Sommai Chandakun, the owner of the van shop, said during curfew her income fell by 90%, but she says she's so lucky not to be in debt. She had to sell both flower garlands and fruits to survive. She said she has faced a crisis like this before, in 2011, when Thailand suffered massive flooding. But she says this year is even worse. It is not only Thai entrepreneurs who have been hit by the crisis. Many foreign investors who come to do flower business at Pak Klong Talat are also suffering.
ช่วงเคอร์ฟิวคือแบบลูกค้าเงียบมากเลยครับพี่จะมีบ้างก็ช่วงจะได้ช่วงเช้าก็ยังมีมานิดหน่อย
A staff member of the Thai Love Flower Trade Shop, one of the outlets owned by a Chinese investor, said even though the curfew is lifted, the market still too quiet. They only have customers in the early morning. For the safety of vendors and customers, everyone has to pass through the hygiene box before entering the market. Disinfectant is sprayed onto the visitor inside the box. Hand sanitizers are provided all around the market, and most importantly, face masks are worn by everyone. Sommai also said she hopes that since the lifting of the curfew and when the pandemic situation is better, Pak Klong Talat will be popular and crowded again.
That's very new normal experience in visiting Pak Klong Talat, but at least the market has been back to business as usual, even though not 100%, Kunat. So they have to keep social distancing, all the directive measure to comply with curbing the COVID-19.
Definitely, but I love the hygiene box that we've seen in the report here. So that means you have to be fully sanitized before you actually enter the market.
Yeah. And in the US today, Kunat, it seems very heating up with how President Trump being exposed again, this time by his former close aide.
Yes, definitely. It's the former National Security Advisor, Mr. John Bolton, who is about to expose the president in his new book, which is called The Room Where It Happened. And of course, the White House is doing everything they can so that the book is not going to hit the shelves. Even the publisher of the book said, this is definitely the book that the president don't even want you to read.
Yeah, John Bolton has been working during the President Trump for 17 months. So he must have got so much anecdotal evidence. So what is it all about?
So basically the secret that he will be exposing about President Trump here includes many incidents, notably the President Trump who tried to ask China to help him secure his re-election during a meeting with the Chinese President Xi Jinping at the G20 summit in Japan last year. So to help him succeed, Mr. Trump wanted China to buy agricultural produce from the US, stating that the Midwestern farmers were key to his re-election. In this book, Mr. Bolton also talked about the Ukraine scandal that led to his impeachment. If we all remember, President Trump was impeached for pressuring the Ukrainian president to investigate Mr. Trump's rival Joe Biden and his son Hunter, or else the US will withhold the military aid for the US-Ukraine relationship here with the military. However, the president denied all the wrongdoing and was acquitted later on. Mr. Bolton also said that the impeachment inquiry into the president might have had a different outcome this year if it had gone beyond Ukraine and investigated other instances of alleged political interference.
So all those secrets will be revealed in his book, but the book has been blocked from publication. So when can people really read it?
Well, basically the book is scheduled to publish around next week. So the administration is doing everything they can to block that. So the Justice Department has already filed a suit on Tuesday in an effort to delay the publication of the book, claiming that it still contained highly classified information and a review by the National Security Council has not been concluded.
Yeah. And so far, what is Mr. Trump's response?
Shall we have a listen to what he actually said on Fox News?
Yeah.
So, yeah, maybe let's have a listen.
Terrible thing that he did, but he broke the law. Very simple. I mean, as much as it's going to be broken, this is highly classified. That's the highest stage. It's highly classified information, and he did not have approval. That's come out now very loud and very strong. And I appreciate Ambassador Lighthizer in front of a committee today on an unrelated topic. They asked him that question. One of our friends in the Democrat Party was very nice to ask him the question. And then he said, absolutely not. Trump was tough on China. Terrible.
So basically, President Trump said Mr. Bolton broke the law for including highly classified information in this book. And he keeps repeating about how bad Mr. Bolton is, saying things like he's a liar, he's all these words like washed up guy. So it shows that President Trump is not happy about this. But besides President Trump, there's another response to the book as well. So the U.S. Trade Representative Robert Lighthizer said on Wednesday that he has never heard President Trump pleading with President Xi Jinping to buy more agricultural products to ensure he would win the re-election at the end of this year.
Well, but the name of the book is The Room Where It Happened. And that's where John Bolton claimed that he have all the evidence, or he heard all the conversation.
And the secrets as well. So besides the China and the Ukraine incident, there are a lot of things that he has discussed in this book. So like what the publisher said, it's something that President Trump doesn't want you to read.
But one thing is for sure, Kun Nat, right now the book has gone up to #1 bestseller pre-sale already on Amazon website.
That's definitely a big response here. And many media outlets have received a copy prior to the sales that will be next week. So many media outlets have been critiquing about Mr. Bolton's new book here. So many media outlets have been saying that is definitely a great exposure, but at the same time, it's more of his personal account of what he has seen. And you can feel that for some media outlets might be thinking that maybe because he's angry, that's why he decided to say all of it in this book.
Yeah, and he refused that he wasn't fired. He quit by himself from being former national security advisor to President Trump. So probably we have to wait for a while before it's available in Thailand.
I wish we could have a read.
Okay, and This week is the week of reopening school, and Kun Thanadet of Thai PBS World has the story of how the school in Thailand has been reopening and what the measure has been introduced during new normal of school time.
Joy and happiness are seen on children's faces on the first day of school reopening. A chance to play with their friends and meet each other after almost 3 months long. The reopening of school has to come up with the strict measures to protect them from infect and spread the virus.
We've got to be really sure that our staff and our students are coming back to a really safe environment. So it started 2 or 3 months ago, actually. Our Health and Safety Committee met and they discussed the kind of things that will be essential for the safe return to school. Those matters were brought together in a policy document and a set of protocols. We made sure that the staff had these protocols and policies to look at and inspect and really understand. We brought the staff in for a day of training, again to make sure that everybody understood what was going on. And I'm talking about things like temperature checking twice a day, disinfecting shoes on entry, social distancing at all times in classrooms and activities. The children have been told they shouldn't touch each other, they shouldn't get within a metre of each other, they should expect to have their temperature taken twice a day, they need to wash their hands every time they leave a classroom to another environment. We've got lots of hand sanitizer gels around the school as well. So the teachers are training the children to wash their hands again and again and again.
Everything is new for everyone. We are actually enter a new sort of process for reopening. So we need to make sure that all the teachers and staff are they do understand what they are into. You know, there are a lot of things that they must comply to, and we need to really ensure that what they do, they truly understand, because they are the people that interact with the children throughout the days.
Just having a look around the classroom, the way that it's set up at the moment, this is very different from what our preference would be. If you were to come into our classroom before we broke up for COVID, what you would probably see is you would see lots of small group activities where children were working together, they were collaborating. Now, if you come into the classroom, it's very much the desks are set up at a safe distance, and the teacher is doing most of the teaching from the front of the classroom. Which is what we've had to do just to ensure that we're able to maintain social distancing and, most importantly, to keep the children safe. But at the end of the day, the learning is similar, the content is still the same. We've just had to adjust the way we deliver it.
Including physical education, they still need to follow the rule of keeping distance and play with their own equipment.
Whoa, off you go!
Now, I think it's an excellent time, and in fact, we were ready to open a few weeks ago. But I think that we have 4 weeks left of term, and to get the students in the school for those 4 weeks is brilliant, because they can now meet each other again. They can engage in the learning in the classroom and outside the classroom. So it gives them a good end to their academic year. Because if we'd gone all the way with distance learning to the end, I think that would have been quite a sad end to the year. So it's been really good to be back. And then, of course, 4 weeks in, then we have a break of about 6 or 7 weeks, and then we come back to school, and they will be refreshed and ready for the new term.
Good boy,
That's how kids' life have been changed because of COVID-19, but they have to adjust during this new normal after COVID-19. And when we think about future of education, what it would be like and how the new generation has to cope with this change, especially during this new normal after COVID-19. Right now we have Kun Parit Vacharasin, founder and CEO of Study, joining us live in the studio. Good evening, สวัสดีค่ะ คุณ Parit ค่ะ So how's your life during COVID-19?
I think it affected all of our lives. I think probably the most direct effect that I had was I was in the middle of preparing to launch my startup, and we were a team of about 50 or 60 people plus. And when COVID came in, I think two things happened. One is that we started working from home straight away. So I think I can't remember the last time that we were all in the same place, even up until today. But then I think secondly, because our startup is involved with education, I think we anticipated quite early on that students returning to school is going to be an issue. Term was supposed to start on the 18th of May. I think when COVID came around March, I assembled kind of my team together and said, look, I think terms most likely going to be delayed. And given that we are basically creating an online application, I think there is something that we can do to help the students while they are not yet able to go back to school.
So actually COVID-19 does help your startup.
I think it accelerated our startup because it meant that I think there was more room for us to create impact. I think our startup was always positioned as kind of a social enterprise. So we're not set up, although we're a private organization, we're not set up to kind of maximize profit, but we're trying to basically solve the issues of giving people access to high quality education. So when COVID came in and we anticipated students wouldn't be able to return to schools, we realized that actually there is room for us to really come in and help the students. So we accelerated our app development and we decided to launch around mid-May without charging what we would normally charge a subscription fee per month to help the students while term is being delayed.
But I like the idea that your startup company is inspired by the Netflix for Thai education. So tell us a bit more of what is it all about.
Yeah, so I think we start with the problem that we're trying to solve. I think what we realize regarding Thai education is I think there are two main issues. One is to do with quality. We look at the PISA rankings, which measure the skill sets of kind of primary and secondary school students in Thailand compared to other countries. We realize that Thailand is quite lower down the order. And we're not trailing just countries in kind of Western Europe where their education system is quite well established, but we're trailing even countries in ASEAN. I think out of the 7 countries that are assessed, we are 5th out of 7. So trailing quite far behind Vietnam and then also behind Malaysia and Singapore. So I think one is we have an issue regarding quality. The second issue is that regarding unequal access. So although students who go to international schools, who go to the top schools in Thailand might be able to get like a high quality education, and that's shown by the PISA scores for those schools being quite high, the majority of students across the country are not getting that higher level of quality in terms of school education. We look at schools across the country. Actually, I think 50% of schools are labeled as kind of small scale schools, so with fewer than 120 students. And a lot of them are actually lacking in the number of teachers. There are sometimes not enough teachers for every grade level. That means you might end up with a primary school with 6 grade levels and not having even 6 teachers. Right? So I think that was kind of, we started off with that problem. Then we realized that one of the kind of the tools that we have as a private sector is technology. Because actually smartphone penetration in Thailand is quite high compared to other countries. I think a recent study by OECD actually said that 86% of Thai students have access to smartphones. And even amongst the low income groups, about 79% of students have access to smartphone. So we decided that what we can do to try and help bridge the gap and make sure that everyone across the country can get access to high quality education is to create a mobile application. And that's kind of the idea of creating what we call like a Netflix of education came into play.
And what's your target? Do you work in tandem with public sector school or private schools?
So we actually are directly to students. So we create an app that's, I think it's modeled a little bit like Netflix. So at the most basic level, it's an app that once you open it, you can access basically learning content for all grade levels, for all subjects, both subjects that I learned in schools and also subjects that we felt were not included in the curriculum but were necessary for skills development. So things like financial literacy, things like digital literacy. So the basic level is almost like an all-in-one app where you open the app, you get access to all learning content, whether it's videos, quizzes, infographic. And we charge basically a monthly subscription fee of around 250 baht per month to make sure that we try to kind of squeeze the prices as low as possible while we can still survive. And then I think on a more advanced level, what our technology does is try to personalize the learning experience. So eventually, two students opening this app will see a very different interface. They will get different recommendations about what topics to study, what quizzes to do, depending on their previous behavior. So exactly like Netflix. So that's kind of what essentially what our app.
Netflix, but Netflix style, but then it's suitable for each student and based on what they want to learn or what they should learn and things that they actually. There are some subjects that are interesting, such as financial literacy, as well as the other thing you just mentioned.
Like digital literacy, right? Yeah. I think it comes from our kind of mission in that we, in a way, like 80-90% of our content is based on subjects learned in schools. And I think at the moment, the app only contains the core subjects, so like math, sciences, English, Thai, social studies, right? But we quickly found out that actually there are so many different skills that are not covered by the curriculum. And we don't want to kind of just work within the system and say, okay, we'll just work with what's already existing. But we try to kind of find partners to come and design these additional curriculum, which is going to be launched kind of later on. I think it's a way for the private sector to not just take kind of the gaps in the public system as given, but try to kind of fill in those missing gaps.
You said you were concerned with social inequality, and that's part of why you are launching this app. And so far, what have you learned from doing this? Yeah, so when we talk about technology, I think it's always a question of whether it increases or decreases inequality, right? Because in a way, if you say 86% of students have access to a smartphone, it reduces inequality amongst those 86% of students. It means that whoever you are out of that 86%, you get the same level of quality. But it does also mean that we are at the risk of leaving behind the 14% that do not have access to a smartphone. So this is why I think it's a fine line to say what the public sector should do and what the private sector can do. In a sense that provided that there is still a proportion of the population that do not have access to technology, I think governments have to be quite careful about making it mandatory. And I think what we saw on the 18th of May was that some miscommunication, which led to some schools making it compulsory, led to a lot of challenges for people in the lower income areas. But I think one surprising fact that we found actually, and this was from kind of our collaboration with the Education Equality Fund, is a lot of our users. So we've had about 100,000 downloads so far since we launched. I think if you take some you have to make some assumptions. But I think if you look at the database provided by EEF, which is the government agency, I think it can be estimated that about 1 in 5 or 1 in 4 people, users in our application are from lower income families. Because the EEF has a database that identify, let's say, the bottom 20% of students across the income level. And I think about 1 in 4, 1 in 5 are from that group. So that's good sign, isn't it? At least 1/4 from people who do not have enough income can really have access to this online.
Yeah, it's a very encouraging statistic for me and the team especially, because when we launched the application, we didn't expect the proportion of lower income students to be that high. We were always worried about how we can help those groups. So I think it's still not 100%. I think we are still aware that in remote areas, it's still not kind of 100% accessibility in terms of smartphone penetration. But I think it's more promising than I thought it was. And I think what we try to do is to unlock different barriers. So having a smartphone is not enough, but how do you unlock kind of internet costs?
Yeah.
Right. So I think that's kind of when we partner with AIS to provide free internet for students who learn through our application.
Yeah. So overall, do we have to thank COVID-19? Because before we talk about a lot about digital disruption, but people seem very hesitant to really adopt online learning classes or application teaching or learning.
Yeah, so I think the impact of COVID on the future of education depends a little bit about what happens once COVID is gone, right? Because when we talk about like new normal, we see kind of students preparing to go back to schools. It will be a very different environment to what they're used to. I think one of the biggest kind of concern for students is that they have to kind of separate, right? So even in the same class, they have to kind of stagger their classes. Let's say like you divide to half, Like Group A goes in on Monday, Group B goes in on Tuesdays. And I think it would be a very different environment to what they're used to. But the question becomes, what happens once COVID is gone? Would everything return to normal, right? I think as someone who works in the education sector, I don't think I agree with online learning replacing schools 100%. Right? I think when we talk about technology and education, we shouldn't see it as a substitute to schools. We're not saying that, okay, students should kind of stay at home and learn from mobile phones, because we know there's so much value in terms of students interacting with each other and interaction with teachers at schools. But what we're hoping to see is kind of teachers in schools using technology to complement the learning in school. For example, one of the ideas that's been kind of thrown around, and I think it's something which we at Study can help support as well, is the idea of flipped classroom. So I think before the world of technology, what we're used to is that if, let's say, a teacher has 1 hour to spend in class with the students, he or she will spend 1 hour kind of lecturing, right? One-way communicating in terms of what happened. If he or she was teaching history, it could be like explaining what events were happening. So students would spend the whole hour kind of listening to a lecture, right? But if we can get the country to a point where students can go and learn those kind of materials online themselves at home, what the teacher can do instead is set that as a homework. So say that, okay, your homework for tonight is to go and find information about this, and then spend the 1 hour in class instead of lecturing, but actually spend that kind of discussing and encouraging group participation, creating group activities, which actually could be much more helpful to the skills development for the students, whether it's critical thinking skills, whether it's communication skills, whether it's teamwork skills, right? So I think that way is a constructive way to use technology to complement but not substitute learning at schools.
So ever since you started this startup company, what were the biggest challenges you've seen so far?
I think it's a challenging environment at the moment. And I think when we talk about access to technology or ability to learn online, right? I think it's not just about having the hardware, having the kind of the smartphone, having the internet connection. But I think during this climate of COVID, or at least in the past when there were heavy kind of lockdown measures, even having the concentration level or having the kind of a quiet space in your house is very challenging. So I think one challenge we saw with regards to online learning is that even though a child might have the necessary smartphone and internet connection, it doesn't mean he or she will be able to benefit fully from online learning unless the learning experience is designed to help his or her kind of experience. For example, if you put a 1 hour long video online, no matter how interesting it is, it's very difficult to grab the student's attention. But if you divide that up into kind of 5 or 6 minute smaller, shorter clips, then it's easier to gauge the engagement and get the students to kind of be more interactive. I think we saw from our database that when we launch our learning videos, if a video is more than 10 minutes long, the rate of completion drops significantly. So I think that's kind of one area which we saw. I think, I guess the other key challenge with this COVID period is that a lot of students in lower income backgrounds don't rely on schools as a place just for learning, but a lot of them rely on schools as a place for providing lunches and meals. Right? I think one very disturbing research finding we saw coming out is that actually a child is almost healthiest at the end of term and almost least healthy at the end of the holidays, because a lot of the students in lower income families are relying on school lunches to provide the nutritional support that they need. So when schools have to be closed because of COVID, it's not just depriving them of education, but it's also depriving them of a place for a healthy meal.
So what do you like to reckon in terms of food for students, low-income students?
So I saw a lot of areas trying to resolve this by basically trying to reallocate some of the budget and then sending kind of food to families across the community. But I think the main factor which can determine whether that kind of program or measure could be successful is actually how much do local communities or local governments actually have in terms of authority to implement that. Right? I think one of the things that we saw with regards to the success of the healthcare system in Thailand is the health volunteers, right? So the village health volunteers, or in Thai you call Osmo, right?
Yes.
Which has contributed to the success of keeping down the COVID figures. I think that kind of decentralized thinking could also be replicated in other areas, including education. So if you give like schools, you give local communities, local governments more authority to come up with their own measures to tackle this, rather than having kind of a one-size-fits-all top-down kind of order. where all the schools have to act exactly the same way, regardless of their environment. I think that could go some way towards ensuring that we can help these students.
Kun Parit, you talk a lot about startup in education, study with very much passion. Just wondering whether you have totally abandoned politics. Any chance to return to politics?
Not at all. I think, in a way, my interest in politics and my interest in my current startup are rooted in the same cause, which is what can we do to create a fairer society? What can we do to create a more progressive society? I think when I was not given an opportunity at the election to go and do that role in Parliament, I took a step back to think about how I can contribute outside of Parliament. And I think one of the key levers to creating a fairer society, a more equal society and a more progressive society is by making sure that everyone in the country gets access to the same higher quality education. So I think for me it's actually the same interest that's giving me passion in both politics and in what I'm currently doing.
So is it like a pause before continuing in politics?
It's hard to predict the future, but I'm still kind of at least kind of in terms of kind of following the events and having an opinion on things. Still very much passionate about politics, and one of kind of my weekend activity is actually to try and push and campaign for amendments to the current constitution.
Right.
And I think actually having seen what happened during the COVID period, I think there are greater calls for constitutional amendment, not in terms of increasing the levels of democracy in Thailand, but also ensuring that the state has the right capacity and the right structure to respond to these crises. Right? I think reforming the civil service, decentralizing the government, or even talking about things like the right of the population to technology and internet, are all matters related to the constitution. So I think for me, I think my two priorities at the moment, obviously, is in education, but the other priority that I'm also giving a lot of attention to is the campaign to amend the constitution.
Yesterday, Prime Minister having press briefing, and he told the whole country that we need to move for new normal government. Anything you like to reckon, or do you think new normal, by your definition, is it on the same page with Prime Minister?
I'm not sure if it's entirely on the same page, but I think in terms of my recommendation regarding political changes, right? I think it's time to seriously talk about amending the constitution, but not just from a democratic angle. Right? I think I've been speaking a lot about how this current constitution gives a lot of power to unelected bodies and how that needs to change to be more in line with democratic standards. One change could be the abolishing the Senate or creating an elected Senate. Right? But I think the other equally important part of amending the constitution is how do we make sure that the country is set up to be able to respond quickly to changes and crises that come in. And I think one of the things we saw is that there were a lot of barriers initially with the current state structure to respond to the COVID crisis. We saw the need to use the emergency measures to come and tackle this health crisis. And I think that indicates the inability of the current system to be able to respond to that. And one of the key learnings that I kind of heard from the academics is the need to reform the civil service. I think one of the reasons that the Paragon Chukchern, not sure what the English for it is.
State of emergency.
Is one of the reasons that it had to be instated, I think, was the inability for the current state structure to be able to respond to crises. And a lot of that is down to the siloed nature of a lot of the ministries and departmental agencies, right? So I think unless we can reform that civil service, I am quite concerned that we will not be as quick and as swift at responding to crises. At the end of the day, we should set up the country in a way that it can respond to crises even under democratic settings, right? It shouldn't have to resort to non-democratic measures to resolve these crises.
So in your personal opinion, what is the role of the younger generation in developing the country?
So I think every generation should play an equally important part in terms of developing this country, right? And in a way, actually, where the share of population is now towards a more aging society as well. So I think every generation has to play a part. I think the question we as a younger generation can ask ourselves is, what are the strengths that we can contribute that perhaps other generations may not be as good at contributing? And I think one of the answers to that is technology, right? I mean, if you look at a household level, right, let's say the internet's broken, like Wi-Fi is not connected. Let's say someone is not sure how to use Line. the person that everyone turns to, whether it's the parents, the grandparents, is actually the children or the younger generations in that household.
Exactly.
I think that's a microcosm of what's happening in society as well, in the sense that our country depends on the younger generation who are more literate with the digital world, who are more up to date with technological changes, to find innovative ways to bring technology to improve the quality of lives of the people, whether it's in education, whether it's in healthcare, whether it's in the economy. I think that's kind of a very important role that younger generations can play. And I think it's no surprise when we look at kind of startups or even kind of corporates that have kind of technology-related units, we see a lot of that being led by younger generation. So I think that's something which I think is a clear strength that the younger generation can contribute, is how do we use technology in a way that helps improve the quality of life of our citizens.
While your eyes are still in politics, what's your plan? I just want to know whether you plan to set up a new party or join, like Kun Gorn, he has set up Phak Kla already, or probably with new group. You can see CARE have also set up a new group as well. Any particular group that interests you at this very juncture?
At the moment, I'm not a member of any party. I think it's actually a good thing that a lot of new parties are coming up, because I think politics is exactly like any other industry or sector, right? The more the competition, the more choices that people have, and that competition can drive each party to create a higher quality product. There's a high quality set of policy. So I think the more the better, and I actually welcome the addition of these new parties. But if you ask me about what my future is, I think I don't have a clear answer on that yet. Yeah. I think my focus at the moment is how to make kind of my startup a success in terms of the impact we want to generate in higher education. I think eventually there might be a case for me to go back into politics, and then by then we will see kind of which party fits with me most ideologically, and if there is none, then maybe there is a need for another new party.
Any chance to return to the Democrat Party?
Not from what I see right now.
So you used to be in the Democrat Party, so what have you learned and applied to your startup company or what you're doing right now?
So I think, without going too much into kind of the ideologies and kind of why I left, I think at least one very good experience that I think I learned from working at the Democrat Party is how to work with people across different generations, right? I think one of the things that we had back in the Democrat Party were politicians across very different generations, different age groups. So I think having that kind of understanding about what each generation's priorities are, how to work with people with different kind of working styles, with different experiences, I think helps a lot in terms of understanding the education sector, right? Because when you talk about education, we're not talking about just about the students, but we're also talking about the parents and the teachers who all come across different set of generations. So I think being able to understand that helps us as a startup to bridge the gap between students, teachers, and their parents, and trying to create a service that we feel would be both beneficial to students but also be supported by the parents and the teachers at schools.
You must have discussed a lot about new leaders in the region, in ASEAN region. So what do you think is the core strength of young leaders in Thailand?
That's a very broad question. I think for me, I guess one strength is honesty. I think one important attribute that leaders should have, whether it's in politics, in government, or in the business sector, is I think you have to be honest to yourself about what you are trying to achieve, how much success you have had, or even how much failure you've had. Right? I think one of the key things that we saw during this COVID crisis is that leaders who have gained a lot of popularity with their public are leaders who have been quite honest about the situation. Right? I think getting a leader who dares to speak the truth, dares to talk about how dangerous this crisis is, very open to talk about what has worked and what has not worked in terms of the measures that have been implemented. I think that level of honesty is very important because it shows kind of authenticity and genuinity, which I think is an attribute that should be possessed by leaders regardless of which field they are in.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much คุณผลิตวัชรศิลป์ for joining us or คุณไอติม as we know it. Thank you very much for joining us in English version on Thai PBS World tonight. And that's the view from คุณผลิตวัชรศิลป์ on how he has been working on startup in education and still his mission and his passion still in politics as well. So we have to stay tuned what will be his next move regarding politics. And that's all from Thai PBS World tonight. Thank you very much for watching. And we'll be back for ทันโลก with Thai PBS World at 8 o'clock. Bye for now.
Bye.